this AJ step aside thing seems to be gathering pace. There's definitely legs. Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren have both said that they are talking to each other or their respective teams. I don't think Eddie and Frank Warren themselves are getting on the phone, but their respective teams are talking to each other about the prospect of Anthony Joshua stepping aside and allowing this undisputed fight between Usyk and Fury. Now, as you guys know, that's what I'm hoping for because undisputed has always been my priority, irrespective of who partakes in that fight. Let's just establish an undisputed champion first and foremost. Apparently, Eddie Hearn is saying that 40 million would be the kind of figure that AJ would be looking at in order to get him to step aside. Now, would Fury versus Usyk generate enough money to, be able to justify paying AJ 40 million pounds? What do you guys think? Globally, is there enough money in that fight? Well, Eddie Hearn says the Saudis are interested in Fury Usyk. And the Saudis, of course, have got all types of money. Right? The Saudi government, the Saudi royal family, they've got loads and loads of money. Perhaps they would be willing to accommodate this AJ step aside to allow the undisputed fight. I don't know. But certainly in somewhere like Britain, they wouldn't be able to come up with that kind of money. In America, they wouldn't be able to come up with that kind of money. I don't know about the Ukraine, but it's not just, again, you have to remember, it's not just a matter of paying AJ the 40 million. You've then got to pay Fury and Usyk purses they're happy with. So you're looking at what? 100 million at least to make this fight happen? Is it feasible to be paying AJ 40 million pounds? You guys let me know what you think in the comments below. And personally, I wouldn't be surprised at all if AJ took substantially less than that. I'm not convinced that it really would be 40 million. In any negotiation, one person goes high, the other person goes low. And they generally end up meeting in the middle. If they both are genuinely interested in this deal, then they usually both end up or often both end up meeting in the middle. And so perhaps 20 million, 25 million might be more realistic that AJ would take for a step aside. That's kind of in line with what Deontay Wilder wanted, if you remember, to step aside and allow AJ to fight Fury, which would have been undisputed at the time. So that to me is probably more realistic, and I hope it can actually happen. You got the likes of Tyson Fury coming out saying AJ needs to step aside. You got Frank Warren coming out saying he needs to step aside. David Haye, however, in this interview, said that he doesn't think AJ will step aside, and if AJ does, he's basically misjudged AJ, and that he's not the fighter that he thought he was. Now, I saw a clip of the True Geordie talking about this AJ Usyk step aside possibility, and he is disappointed that AJ is contemplating this, and he was pointing out all the contradictions and the stuff AJ's saying, rightly so. AJ has been kind of contradictory and what have you, and I also agree with what he said with regards to AJ not appearing to be very confident. These are all things I agree with him on. However, True Geordie and David A and other people seem to be of the mind that AJ stepping aside would be a bad thing for AJ. Whereas I don't think it would be. I think AJ stepping aside is actually a good thing for him. I think the pressure that he's been under his whole career has been absolutely incredible. And moving away from that pressure might actually allow him to develop and then, come back, let's say 2 or 3 fights down the line as a better fighter. I know they say pressure can make people and, they can learn how to deal with certain situations. AJ's been in them situations for how many years? Is it really going to make him any better constantly being under pressure now? Maybe it's time to actually alleviate some of that pressure, allow him to develop, to have some learning fights. And I'm not talking about him fighting journeymen. I'm talking about him still fighting good opponents. But just allow him to develop, perhaps under a new trainer, to find himself as a fighter, to understand what he needs to do, and then come back stronger, mentally stronger, more focused, and more together. Believing not only in himself more, but in his team more. Because clearly he's in disarray with regards to his team, who he should listen to, what style he should adopt, and so on. And when you are under the spotlight, that can be more confusing because you can just lose yourself. There are so many hangers on. There are so many voices in your ear. When you step away from the spotlight, it can be easier to take stock of what is actually going on and what you need to do. So, yeah, I think it's probably going to be a good thing for AJ to take the step aside and then fight somebody else. You know, maybe a couple of fights before, even if he doesn't fight anyone in between now in the Usyk rematch, I still think a step aside would be a good idea, depending on when he would get the crack at the winner of Usyk Fury. If it was going to be not for a year or something, then, you know, you have to bring in at least a warm-up fight so he's not rusty going into the rematch. Or, you know, assuming Usyk wins, it could be Fury that wins. But if it's not going to be such a, you know, great length of time, then I think AJ, even if he doesn't fight anybody between now and then, should still take the step aside because he'll be more prepared for Usyk mentally. It gives him more time to prepare mentally, gives him more time to prepare technically. If he's going to be working with new trainers, it gives him more time to adjust to their training style, their training regime, to adopt the kind of tactics and techniques they would want him to employ against Usyk in a rematch. And perhaps it won't be Usyk, perhaps it will be Fury. Maybe Fury's style suits AJ more so than Usyk right now, because he's not as fleet of foot as Usyk. I know people are going to talk about how fleet of foot Fury was against Vladimir Klitschko and this, but he's never going to be as fleet of foot as Alexander Usyk. I mean, I spoke in several videos about Tyson Fury admitting that he couldn't outbox Steve Cunningham. He realized early on, this guy's too fast, he's too slippery. I'm not going to be able to box with this guy. I have to get this guy to come to me. I have to get him to start exchanging. Because if it's a pure boxing match, this guy's going to outbox me. I'm paraphrasing, but this is essentially what Tyson Fury was saying about Steve Cunningham. And that was Steve Cunningham towards the back end of his career. Alexander Usyk moves at least as well as Steve Cunningham. I'm telling you, he moves better than that. Better head movement, better foot movement. So Tyson Fury doesn't have the mobility that Usyk has. More stationary. From a stylistic point of view, that might actually play into Anthony Joshua's hands. Not that it means AJ's going to beat Tyson Fury necessarily, but it probably will mean that he'll find it easier to hit the target. Whereas with Usyk, his eyes were in separate, his eyes were spinning round. You know, he almost went cross-eyed trying to track Usyk because Usyk was just all over the place. Constant movement. Fury, particularly this latest incarnation of Tyson Fury, coming in real heavy, 270s, 280s, whatever he is now, he's not going to be able to move like that. Much bigger target. Yeah, he's still got slick upper body movement and what have you, but got caught plenty of times against Wilder. So, again, long story short, I think it's actually going to be a good thing. Or at least, if you don't want to look at it in terms of good or bad, look at it in terms of pluses and minuses, or advantages and disadvantages. There are advantages for AJ in terms of stepping aside. He has more time to prepare, more time to get himself together mentally, tactically, and so on. Maybe a tune-up fight in between. Being out of the limelight, alleviating a lot of the pressure he's been under his whole career, etc. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below about everything I've raised in this video.